God, very God, died on the cross. Okay? There was nothing left of comfort or value or glory at all up there in the white hot holy hilarity of the Godhead. There was nothing left. And I think this is so important in understanding what happened on the cross. If there had been anything of value left over, and again, words fail, but if there had been anything left over of value in the process of the incarnation, God, Hebrews 1, through whom he made the heaven, who sustains all things by his powerful will, through whom he made, after he made, atonement for sins anyway. If there had been anything left of value in that process, the Father would have sent it instead of him. I think we're given language like God the Father and God the Son for a reason, even though we readily acknowledge that those words fall far short of the reality. They don't wrap up the whole subject. They just kind of point in a vague direction. God the Father is kind of father-ish, and God the Son is kind of son-ish. Okay? But but that doesn't mean they're meaningless. No, there's great meaning there. And what father would ever sacrifice his son? Do you understand? I mean, that's just, who died on that cross? The Father died on the cross just as much. 20 years ago, I had cancer. 11 months later, my daughter had cancer. She was 3. There was no comparison. There was no comparison to the suffering. Mine was a cakewalk. Mine was nothing compared to my daughter. And I think we're given those words, Father and Son, for a reason, so that we can go, into places like this and think, now wait a minute. God, what was happening? What was happening? If the Son suffered on the cross, the Father suffered a zillionfold on the cross. Do you understand? Does that make sense? Does your spirit go, yeah, that's right? And I think that's what's reflected even in the words. When Jesus on the cross says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Famous, especially in the King James. When he says, why have you forsaken me? I think in those words we're getting a reflection, not as I was told, that the Father is so holy and so utterly above sin that when all the sin of the world came on Jesus, the Father could no longer bear to look on him. That's the traditional view. He is so utterly ensconced in his jewel-encrusted holiness that he had to turn his back on the Son. I think that's repugnant. What's actually happening there is Jesus senses this, a disturbance in the force, if you will. And he feels this abandonment by God. And I think that's a reflection. Why? Because at that moment, the Father had nothing left to give. The Father had nothing to give the Son because the Father had nothing. Is that big?
Because of losing Jesus?
Because he gave everything on the cross. The Father, I'm working against this notion that the Father had some goodness, glory, beauty, comfort, something in him while the Son was dying. No, if he had anything left over, he'd have said, well, forget this, I'll give this instead of that. Do you see? I think that's what we see in the incarnation. So the Father had no goodness left in him to give to the Son. I think that's more what is being reflected in that.
But Dan, I think there's something that we forget. Jesus, in the incarnation, was fully human. As I heard somebody say, did you think about the dirty diapers that Mary had to change? Did you think about the crying? Did you think about the skin knees? Did you think about everything else? And he was fully human on that cross. So instead of saying, what was he thinking when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Look at the moment and ask yourself, what was he feeling?
Mhm.
Because I think that was a
Sure.
statement of pure emotion, not of philosophical or,
Theology.
or religious or theological
Yeah.
revelation that was going on right there.
Sure.
And there was just something so powerful, we probably can't explain it,
course.
we can't understand it.
Yeah.
But that it was happening in his humanity in that moment. But one thing I know had nothing to do with God leaving him. I mean, even think about the little thing that Dan acted out for you here. If it was the sin of the world, well, it wasn't like there was extra sin created just for Jesus. It was the whole sin of the world, which was already there. So then if it's so abhorrent to God, he would have turned his back on us before
On the world,
then.
yeah. True.
And that's not what happened at all.
Yeah. My heart is captured at the moment with what was going on within the Godhead and within the Godhead. And I agree with you. Jesus was human and he was giving not a theological dissertation, but his very real feeling. But I think what he was feeling was that the Father had nothing left to give him. Yes, Vernon.
Can you back up to what you said about the difference between he and it in one of these passages?
Between he and it.
Yeah, maybe
In
somebody
one of
picked
these
that up better
passages?
than I did. I don't know if it was talking about the Godhead fully, you're talking about the distinction between commenting about he and it.
What was he, what?
I don't know, that's
Yeah,
what, that's
you
what.
can find it. You mentioned it in.
He would have given it.
Oh,
Maybe.
yeah.
If there was something.
Oh, yeah, if there'd been anything left of good value within the Godhead, the Father would have given it instead of Jesus. He would have gladly substituted, if there's anything good. Another way to say that is, if the Father could have died on the cross in the place of his Son, he would have.
If it could have been done another way.
Done another way, yeah. Yeah.
And the other comment I want to make, this is going to be real brief, is that I think that there's a reaction in my mind to saying that God the Father died because we associate death with the body.
Yeah.
A spirit can't die.
Right.
Okay? So maybe the terminology has to be adapted or something to say that he gave it all.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're bound with this idea that death relates to the body because
Yeah.
we believe that our spirit goes on.
Yeah.
Okay? But God the Spirit
It doesn't have a body.
gave it all to, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing is the whole father-son thing only works if there's feeling.
The essence.
If Dan only thought about Alicia and thought about the cancer that she had at age 3, he can't get up there and say, and you saw the emotion that comes out of it.
Yeah.
It's because he felt in that circumstance. And in the same way, I have no doubt that the Father felt
Yeah.
in that moment.
Joined in.
Yeah, joined in.
Totally.
Granted, we're fumbling around with mysteries that we can barely even, touch the hem of the garment
Thank.
But what is happening in me, at least, is what happened there is so much bigger than what we think happened there. Let me take a step back and come at it another direction. Some of this we've used some of this imagery before. Months ago, I shared with you a revelation. I was out jogging and I heard a bird and thought about Jesus saying, 2 birds are sold for a penny, and yet the Father is aware of every bird that falls. And that's a lot of birds, I would think. Birds that, many human beings will never even see. Is that really true? Well, here's what is so clear to me, is what Jesus is getting at there is not that the Father is a person sitting up somewhere. And we seem to be hardwired to God is up.